This game is only 10 years old, and I say only because by Nintendo 64 standards, that's fairly recent. This was a very late release in the console's lifespan, published just 7 months before Nintendo launched the GameCube. And you might assume that would make this a technical marvel, one of those games that really benefits from its developers having a strong familiarity with the console. But unfortunately, that's not what Dr. Mario was prescribing on the Nintendo 64. Now, generally speaking, it's hard to criticize Dr. Mario. Ever since its debut in 1990, it's always been one of the most popular games from the post-Tetris puzzler boom. In the years since, the game has seen several new versions, all of which are built from the same fundamentally awesome puzzle game. This was the third Dr. Mario title released for a home console, and in some ways, it was the most ambitious. Dr. Mario 64 had more features and modes than any previous Dr. Mario game, but in other ways, it was also the least ambitious. You have to look at a release like this in context, and in 2001, Nintendo 64 owners expected a lot more than this. And so did the critics, quite frankly. Dr. Mario 64 did not receive great reviews. Lazy, outdated, decade-old rehash, just a handful of the criticisms thrown into Dr. Mario 64's bottle. But looking at the game 10 years later, it's a lot less disappointing than it used to be. Yeah, it's basically the same game it had always been, but really, what else does Dr. Mario need to be? The first thing you notice with Dr. Mario 64 is that it gives you a lot of ways to play. In fact, for single-player options alone, there are 6 different gameplay modes. A classic Dr. Mario mode is your first option, but there's also a versus mode against the computer, a marathon mode, a score attack mode, a flash mode, there's even a story mode. Yes, there's actually a story, flimsy as it may be. Wario wants to steal Dr. Mario's Mega Vitamins, but of course, it's never that simple. And these really silly cutscenes tie together an increasingly tough series of versus puzzles, and although the story is complete nonsense, the effort, however minimal, is appreciated. Marathon and Score Attack offer their own self-explanatory twists on the Dr. Mario formula, but the Flash mode is pretty interesting. Rather than destroying every last virus in the bottle, you only have to go for the flashing ones instead. It's not some major revelation, but it is a fun new take on the traditional game. And actually, that's not a bad description of Dr. Mario 64 as a whole. So let me make the case for Dr. Mario 64. This is a great version of a great puzzler, packed with more ways to play it than ever before. And plus, it was originally released at a budget price of $29.99, a price that was worth it for the multiplayer alone. And in fact, that's easily the game's strongest asset. Dr. Mario 64 supported 4-player multiplayer, the most ever supported in a Dr. Mario release. And as Nintendo 64 owners who were willing to pay the $30 can attest, few things in life are as much fun as Dr. Mario with 4 doctors, diagnosis, and infectious good time. Of course, you can find the cartridge even cheaper these days, and if you do, it's a game worth owning for any puzzler fan. It may not seem like a very impressive release, and in some ways it wasn't, but Dr. Mario 64 is a robust Dr. Mario release, a fun repackaging of an old favorite.